There were families here. There were kids in the street playing football, right? There were neighbors. This house was the candy lady. As kids, we would come down and spend our quarters and sit here on this porch and eat it and just enjoy the atmosphere of the community, right? And that went away. It's just overnight, it just got washed away.
We are seeing scenes like this one throughout the city.
Do you remember if you told him that the levees had broken?
I don't recall specifically, but it was that New Orleans is flooding.
No. Sit. Knocked over them plants on that porch last night, huh? Missy's some upset with you.
A couple months ago, we had a rainstorm. Just an ordinary rainstorm in southeast Louisiana. It was one of those days that we thought, hey, just a little rain. But lo and behold, the city flooded. The drainage system was not up to par.
I remember in '92, Hurricane Andrew, when the calm came, we would play out in the water. It was just another day off from school, right? We loved hurricanes as kids, but now it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
This is not a hoax. This is real. Climate change is real. So how do we live with it? I think in this section of town, we start to understand that water and climate change goes hand in hand.
New Orleans, in the last 5 to 7 years, has really taken on a great adaptation of climate resilience and climate change. Elevation is one of the major adaptations that you sometimes see, is that the houses are raised higher. This is the Center for Sustainable Engagement and Development. We have rain gardens here. We help communities how to build rain gardens. We also have an orchard. You can see over here, we have lemons. Here's one of here. After Katrina, you had all these toxins from the water. So that went into the soil, and that's all over the lower Ninth Ward, and probably a lot in Louisiana. Evidently, the process of going through the trees to bear fruit, it doesn't come into the fruit. Also, we recommend above bed gardens where you can put fresh soil to give you crops that are not tainted with that point. What we've tried to do is help with the community to first educate them, because they get confused about, is climate change a political issue? Is it real? We just try to give them the facts. Then we try to show how they can be advocates for how we adapt to that climate.
George Bush was from Texas. He understood about climate change, where he came from, okay? But this fellow, if you grow up in a tower in New York, you have no idea. He only has 3 years. And let's face it, we lived through 12 years of recovery. We can live through 3 more years of Donald Trump.
If we don't do something, all this beauty of New Orleans that everybody loves, tourists come down and see, they'll be looking at just water. That's it.
The plan we've relied on believes that we can fight water. And if you've ever been to a beach when there's a riptide and you think you can fight water, you will learn that you will lose that battle.
With a climate adaptation plan, you have a wet system and a dry system. So when you need to lift water out, you can do that. But when you need to let water in, you can let the water in through that system into these canals and circulate it around the city.
I mean, some people might walk past here and think, oh yeah, it's just overgrown grass. No, it's a low-lying area that has certain vegetation in it that is the perfect vegetation when you want water to absorb and be able to dissipate at a more gradual rate. I mean, it doesn't look like a lot of natural science, but there's a lot of natural science that goes into it.
It costs less to have green infrastructure because this is low maintenance.
This is a model of a part of the city of the main drainage basin. You have an underground system, the white lines under the earth. The idea was to get the water into these pipes, to get that water to these pumps, and just push it out. That was the method.
The truth of the matter is, there's no way to solve our water issues with just our pumps and turbines. It's not enough. It will never be enough.
You know, decades of doing the wrong thing usually kill you. We got our death warning in 2005.
If there was a political will to make sure that this city sees another 300 years, it would mean having very beautiful, very aesthetic blueways along with greenways throughout the city. Us living with water. So that when that next storm comes, because it's gonna come, that's a fact, that water has a place to go other than your cars and your homes and the streets.
At some point after Hurricane Katrina, people started to get really serious about coastal issues, and they started to think about risk reduction, protecting people from flooding, together with restoration as one thing that needed to be addressed. And so we came up with this coastal master plan, which is a list of projects that have been scientifically vetted. And so we have projects that dredge material from one place and put it in another place to actually build new marshes where there's open water at the moment. On the risk reduction side, we have extensive series of levees and floodgates around some critical coastal communities. These are projects that we think will work. Not work now, but work into the future.
The state's coastal master plan is a $50 billion, 50-year plan. I consider myself an oceanographer and a coastal geologist, so I look at issues like why we sink in Louisiana, and I also look at issues like how we rebuild the coastal landscape. The barrier islands are one of the first lines of defense against a storm, right? So notice how this is now pretty much continuous. There's no channels in the middle of it. This is an example of a restored barrier island. All right, and then you can see New Orleans. So that's one of the major post-Katrina levee improvements. So the idea was to basically wall off this area to prevent a storm surge from getting to the lower Ninth Ward. Levees are sometimes built with earth and sometimes they're built with concrete, but the core point is that they are all a wall that protects an area from waves and rising waters from a storm. The biggest variable in this is sea level rise. If the sea level rise rates are at the low end of the spectrum of what people predict, then you could rebuild large areas of the landscape and provide flood protection for a lot of people. If rates are at the high end, then I think a lot of areas will be lost, even with the state's best efforts.
There's no saving all of it. It's one of the toughest parts about our job. But you can strategically try to help protect the communities, and so that's what we focus on. My name is Dr. Sarah Mack, and this is my little newborn Josephine. I was the emergency manager for Hurricane Katrina for the Storage and Water Board of New Orleans. And then I ended up starting my own company after that because I realized that unless you dealt with our massive rates of wetland loss, which are actually some of the fastest rates in the world, about 1 football field every hour, that it didn't matter what we did inside the levee system, that we were gonna lose New Orleans. So right now we're at the Cypress Forest at the Lafitte Trails. And these forested wetlands provide such important hurricane protection because the 3-dimensional structure of the trees take the force out of the waves before they hit the levee system.
You doing okay? Like going on walks in the wetlands?
What I felt was one of the biggest limiting factors on wetland restoration is having the funds to do it. So the way that carbon finance works is that we allow investment for big companies to offset their greenhouse gas emissions. Because when we're facing massive wetland loss in Louisiana, the previously stored carbon can be re-released into the atmosphere as these areas convert to open water. Most big civilizations live close to water. And so we're not going to be the only ones that are dealing with this. We're just some of the ones that are dealing with it first.
All right. Well, welcome to Cocodrie. The master plan needs a lot of inputs, and so the kind of work that I do feeds into the parameters that the state needs as part of its master plan. So this is the Bubba Dove structure, which is one of the major floodgates in the Morganza to the Gulf levee system. With a levee, one question that you have is who's inside and who is outside the levee system. By drawing this wall in the marsh, you're changing the environment, but you're also setting down a series of principles of who lives where and the kinds of choices that these communities face in the years ahead, some of which are going to be very, very tough choices. So, I just wanted to give you a view of what the salt marshes around here look like. You can see that there's marsh for miles in that direction. Marshes provide a lot of buffer from storm energy. So they're a buffer between our human civilization and the sea. So the restoration involves pumping sediment into a marsh like this to raise the elevation, to allow it to better keep pace with sea level rise and to fill in areas that have eroded. I think Louisiana has a lot to speak to the future because the rates of sea level rise in Louisiana, they're actually in line with what the globe could experience around 2050. The kinds of lessons that we learn here in Louisiana are exemplative of the kinds of situations that the rest of the country and the rest of the globe could be in 20, 30 years from now.
Darwin said it best when he talked about survival of the fittest and being able to adapt and change. I mean, your environments are always going to change, so we have to adapt. The world is absolutely changing. Climate is absolutely changing. Mankind not changing quite as fast.
I hope that we do something that has an impact. I hope there's infrastructure, innovation that can manage the water that we live with, that we're surrounded by. I know that the water's not going anywhere, but developers, everybody has to understand that we're in this fight together. Poor people, rich people, people with many resources, people with little, we're all in this together.